The top 5 most common mistakes we see. Number 1, no act 1. I'm Karin Beery with Right Now Editing, where we turn good manuscripts into great books.
And I'm Peg Thomas, multi-award winning author and editor, and we are 2 editors for 5 minutes, more or less.
More, more or less. Okay, before we start the clock today, first we want to introduce this series that we're doing. Peg and I were talking about this, and we both see a lot of the same mistakes in manuscripts that we're editing and sometimes in the books that we read. And so we thought we would take some time to talk about the things that we see most frequently in manuscripts. So we're going to start with my 5 most frequent, mostly because I came prepared and I kind of sprang this on Peg at the last minute. So she'll be prepared for next time. But now we will start the clock as we talk about one of the issues that I see pretty regularly, which is no act 1. And what do I mean by that? What I mean is there is no introduction at all. Like, we might get, here's the characters' names and a little bit of, a page or 2 of this is where they live or maybe this is their job, but there is no time taken to introduce the characters, introduce their, goals or, their motivations. It's and I kind of blame this. Peg, tell me if you've seen this. There's such an emphasis on start with action that people are starting with the action that leads into act 2 without taking any time to introduce who the players are and what's at stake. Peg, have you seen any of this in any of the manuscripts or books that you've read recently?
Yeah, I've seen maybe not totally missing it, but skimping on it to the point where the book is starting. There's all this stuff going on. I have no idea who these characters are. I'm not even sure where in the world they are. There's been no setting, and I don't care what's happening to them because I know nothing about them.
And that is the problem, is that you don't care. Now, we were chatting, the one exception to this is really that suspense thriller genre, where a lot of times you can just jump right in because the people who read the thrillers and suspense, they don't mind being confused at the beginning of the books, which is honestly one of the reasons why I don't read a whole lot of suspense, because I hate not knowing what's going on for 4 or 5 chapters at a time. Um, but especially, history, for historicals, Peg, how important is it to have that opening act?
With historical fiction or historical romance, you really need to set the reader down in the time frame. You have to put them back to whatever the era is, whether it's World War II, whether it's colonial America, whether it's Vikings. Okay, it doesn't really matter. If you don't bring the reader back to that time and get them in that mind frame, um, it's not, the story is just not going to unfold for them like you want it to. If they read your opening chapter and it could just as easily be happening today in a park down the road somewhere, you've missed it. Okay, so you're going to do that first opening scene with the sights and the smells and the sounds that they would be surrounded with, which is going to then surround your reader using that sensory, um, just the sensory words that will bring them back in time. Okay. And if you do that well, the reader doesn't realize you did it. They just all of a sudden are there. They're back in time. They feel the cold, slimy walls of the castle beneath their hand. And you set them in there so deeply that when the action starts, the reader already knows where they are. And that's very important.
And that's gonna be as equally important, like, if you're doing any type of speculative fiction where it's a foreign planet, spaceship, anything like that. Within any type of contemporary, whether it's romance, suspense, general, fiction, you still need to establish that because the reader needs to know, is it summer? Is it winter? Is it the South? Is it the US? There needs to be something to ground your reader, but the biggest thing is you have to introduce who the characters are, because Peg nailed it with, if you don't know who the characters are, you don't care what they're doing. And when you open up a book, and you see two people having dinner and all of a sudden the police come in and arrest someone, well, I don't know. Is that person a criminal? Should that person be arrested? Is this person being framed for something? There's no way to know because nothing has been laid out before the reader. There, nothing has been set. And so that's the thing that I see most frequently. And because we don't want to just leave you with this is what's wrong. So our tips, Peg gave some great examples. You've got to use all of your sensory descriptions to really create the setting. But I love how Jeff Gerke mentions it in some of his books and teachings, which is establish normal. You need to show the readers what your characters' normal lives are like so that when they enter into the story, they know how it's changing. Because if we don't know how it's changing or why it's changing, readers don't know if they should be upset or excited about it. So, Peg,
And I think
we got
another
one
thing that
second left.
one
We got
second,
1 second left.
I'm gonna go over it again. Go figure. Another thing is that the reader needs to understand that beginning with action doesn't mean something has to blow up.
Mhm.
Okay, action doesn't necessarily mean something huge happening around the character. It can mean a revelation in the character's own mind, something that they suddenly understand that they didn't understand before. Sometimes action is the introduction of a very unique character that grabs your interest. So action doesn't necessarily mean a car has to crash or a building has to blow up. And I think sometimes when we say action, action is movement. Okay, it's not necessarily something drastic, but it's movement. Something's happening.
And that's all we've got for you on Act One because there's a lot more we could tell you, but we've already gone over our 5 minutes. So stop back next week and we'll talk about the second most common issue that I see and how you can fix it. Until then, I'm Karen Beery.
And I'm Peg Thomas, and we'll see you next time.